Hello, welcome to day 2 of our Bible reflections for Advent. Not a very Adventy reading today from the Bible course. It's the first 2 chapters of the book of Nehemiah. But on the other hand, it is part of the story that led to the coming of the King Jesus. And so in that sense, it kind of does fit with Advent. Sometimes I think it's difficult when you read the Bible to actually... There isn't always a standout verse or a standout point, and I found that for me today. And then I had a little think and pray about it and realised that for me there's a standout theme in these 2 chapters, and that is the theme of vocation. Now, I'm a vocations advisor, which means that people come to me from time to time to talk about when they feel God is calling them to something. Not necessarily being a vicar, it could be a pastoral person or a youth worker, or it could be that they feel called to start a business. It could be anything, and we kick a few ideas around and we explore it together. It's great fun. And sometimes we talk about how with a vocation, sometimes we feel called to the thing we love, things that we love to do, or something we're passionate about. But other times, a vocation can actually come about because of feeling sad or feeling angry. Because when we look at something that is wrong in the world, we can actually begin to sense that God is calling us to do something about it. And I think that's the case with Nehemiah in today's passage. He'd had news from Hanani, one of his brothers, it says. I don't know whether that means it was his actual brother or just another person from his tribe, who'd come to say that Jerusalem, the city where Nehemiah was born and where his ancestors was buried, was in ruins. He said that the people were in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem was broken down and the gates had been burned with fire. And the first thing that Nehemiah does is he sits down and he weeps. He feels incredibly sad for what has happened to his city. It says, "For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven." So the first thing he did was weep, and then he began to pray. He brought the situation to God. He talked to him about it, and he listened to what God had to say. And out of that time of weeping and fasting and praying, Nehemiah's vocation emerged. He was called by God to go and rebuild Jerusalem. Well, once you have a sense of your call, your vocation, then you need to do something about it. You need to take steps to actually make that happen. Otherwise it will always be just a call, just a dream, just something that you thought about but you didn't do anything. And so Nehemiah knew that he needed to go and ask his boss, who happened to be the king, Artaxerxes, I'm almost going to say that wrong, a pagan king, for a considerable amount of time off. Now, depending on your relationship with your boss, that might seem like an easy or a difficult thing for you to do. But certainly, Nehemiah was filled with fear. And he put it off, I think. But one day he happened to be serving the king. He was the cupbearer, and the king noticed that he was sad, and he asked him why. And so at this point, even though he's full of fear, Nehemiah knows that he needs to take his courage into his hands and ask that he can leave the court and go and spend some time rebuilding the city. He's afraid, but he knows that God's called him, and he knows that God is with him. And guess what? The king grants him permission, and he gives him letters of introduction and a way to go and get resources to rebuild the walls. And he even sends a small army with him to protect him on the way, which is pretty impressive, I think. So Nehemiah has begun to fulfill his calling, and off he goes to Jerusalem. And if you read through the book of Nehemiah, you will see all sorts of obstacles that Nehemiah faces, not least the enemies that are mentioned in this chapter, Sanballat the Honorite and Tobiah the Ammonite. who mock him and who try to stop him and try to prevent him from doing what God has called him to do. And those of you who are following your vocation, your calling from God, will know that just because you start out on that journey, it's not always easy. And it's at those times when things are tough that we're able to look back and remember that God has called us to it. And when God calls, he gives the means and provision for us to do it, and he promises that he will be with us in it. No matter how tough things get, he is there, always ready for us to turn to. So that's the message I got from Nehemiah chapter 1 and 2 this morning. But you might have got something different. You might have something you want to say in the chat below this video, or you may like to ask a question, or you may get a whole other discussion going. It's over to you now. Thank you. Bye.